I'm here at Low Carb Denver 2023 and I've caught up with the aggressive but always correct Dr. Tro.
No, I'm happy to be here. We go way back, actually. I think maybe at least 7 years we were battling on Twitter, you know.
Actually, we could start with that because we had a bit of a battle around kind of cholesterol and all that stuff. And my memory is you placed a fair amount of stock in LDLP and all this kind of stuff. And I was claiming that it was almost no importance at all, and you weren't happy with that, but I think you did shift over time. So what's your current kind of belief around the crucial importance or slight importance or maybe not so important at all of ApoB and LDLP?
Yeah, so look, what did you get right? 100% you got right, CACs. CACs, 100% right, okay? I think my biggest gripe was a small gripe, and it's an ideologic gripe. You know, you had this beautiful infographic on, you know, people with LDLs across 2 different data sets. And I was like, you can't do that. Like, you know, you can be right, you know, but we have to be careful on how we convince people of us being right. I mean, and now, like, you were on the right side of time. You know, CACs made it into the AHA ACC guidelines in 2019. Right? So you were ahead of your time, right? And people were upset at you about CACs and, you know, well before they know. And then the questions you bring up, which is why have we focused on LDL when we have a CAC, are absolutely correct. You know, so my gripes, I think, looking back, what would I say? I would say I was a fool in the sense that I focused on how you delivered your message, right? Which I still would say I think it was wrong. And I ignored the fact that the behemoth here is what you were saying was absolutely right. And I remember 2018, I went to a conference and I talked to Steve Neeson, one of the most premier cardiologists. And I said, you know, why aren't we doing CACs? Right? Why aren't we doing it? Whether it's too expensive, people tolerate statins just fine. And then the next year, the really expensive injection drugs came out. He says, well, whoever doesn't tolerate statins can go on these injection drugs. It's a beautiful thing. And so I think what you do, which I didn't appreciate enough in my immature days, was you highlight regulatory capture and you highlight what people are missing, right? I think the next step of medicine is showing people with the most highest degree of evidence in the best way we can, right? Like taking theory out of it and taking marketing and communication out of it and just giving people more data. And that's been my prime focus for the last, since we've maybe started squibbling on Twitter, is how do I bring the medical community more and more data to question the convention, right? Because you were questioning the convention. And you were putting together sort of all the data you could find at the time, right? Like I think it was like an NHANES data set versus another data set, and you showed that people with heart attacks had lower LDLs than, you know, something like that, right? And it looked awesome. It was very convincing, right? And the purpose was to tell people, hey, LDL doesn't matter as much as maybe a CAC in metabolic health, which are absolutely true, right? So how do we refine our approach so that the, you know, really skeptical, you know, potentially naive doctors like I was, right, buy in, right? How do we get them to buy into leaving the convention and thinking differently, right?
Critical thinking, essentially independent critical thinking from the data, I agree. No, thanks for that, Tro, but I also began to incorporate a few years after our little squabbles, the actual 5 risk algorithms from all around the world for cardiac risk. And I just put in a guy with a sky-high LDL, and then I put in no blood pressure, no diabetes, etc., and he'd come out low risk, no medication. And that better illustrated the point because it leveraged all the algorithms from around the world, not my data, those guys. So, but that was the trick. But you know, we got to get to your current work, your talk, and that study you did recently in those employees, because that was superb. I featured it already in some of my keynote talks. Let's do that.
So you bring up a great point. When you plug in metabolic health improvements into the modern day calculators, MESA calculators, AHA, ACC calculators, and the European calculators, metabolic health improvements decrease cardiovascular mortality. So we took exactly what you were doing and we put it into the literature. A company came to us and said, we want to bring metabolic health to our employees. And I said, well, I know the people coming to me, I can affect change. I don't know if you give me a random smattering of 150 people, how we're going to do. So let's track them cohort by cohort and make sure that we're having the effect we think we're going to have, so that we're not harming somebody, And so the first cohort, out of the 150, 200 patients that we have through this employer, we track them. It's been over a year now, and the questions we had were how effective were we at reducing weight, how effective were we at reducing A1C, how effective at deprescriptions, and did we reduce their cardiovascular risk based on those current risk calculators, which is the way that modern evidence-based medicine wants us to think. So I used their metrics against them, right? So that was the purpose, right? So the purpose, which is what you were doing back then, like, hey, look, you don't need to pay attention to LDL if you improve the cardiovascular risk. So we had these 15 or so initially, and now it's 150, but all of the plots look exactly the same. Our effectiveness has been exactly the same, just on point with Virta. In 6 months, the average participant loses 12% of their body weight, which is more than Ozempic, which is 11% of their body weight or semaglutide at 6 months. And this is while deprescribing, while taking off medications, including blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol medications that are just not needed. And we reduced their blood pressure 17 points. We reduced A1C while deprescribing insulin and GLP-1 inhibitors, 1.1% A1C, which is a big deal. And per employee, the annualized savings from the deprescription, while we improved their cardiovascular mortality, was $4,000 per patient, which is an astronomical amount. Insulin and GLP-1 inhibitors agonists are expensive. So. Bottom line, 15 patients, we reduced their weight by 34 pounds on average. We reduced their A1C while deprescribing, and we reduced their blood pressure while deprescribing blood pressure meds, and we reduced their cardiovascular risk by 44%, meaning if we plug them into these calculators, their risk of dying before they started were, I think it was 9, and we got them down to, I think it was 6 or so, 44%.
Yeah.
Which you could have predicted.
Well, I don't like to be arrogant, but perhaps I could have. But no, that's a superb study, and obviously it's small and it's not a controlled RCT, but that's fine because the results are so dramatic. But you said there was 15, I think. I saw the graphs. It's just beautiful the way they all cluster together similarly. But you say you have 150 in total. Are you going to do a follow-up later?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just did a poster on our second cohort, which is, so we had 15 and then 35 or so, and then, there's other cohorts that are now at 3 months into their program, and just starting. So we are going to publish basically as each tranche sort of progresses. We're looking at 6 months, a year, and 2 year. And I have no reason to believe that there's any, it's going to continue. So I think we will, at 1 year, beat most GLP-1 inhibitors, full stop.
Excellent. And the GLP-1 actually are quite effective in fairness, but it's always better to do it in a nutrient-dense, change to a proper diet and lifestyle way that's sustainable. Last thing, because we're keeping these short, where do you find yourself and your website, and you have a whole new kind of organization really in the last few years?
Yeah, so look, Dr. Tro app, you can just get started with a community education You don't even need to see me. You can get a CGM anywhere in the United States. You can get a sleep study within in about a month. We'll have nationwide sleep studies that you can order on your own. Unlike Europe, you can't get a CGM without a prescription. So we're going to democratize CGMs, democratize sleep studies, democratize some genetic testing. So you can go right on the app and start, getting involved and getting to know your own information. And we're not making any money off of that. It's just a service, right? But hopefully when people are on our app, they see the sort of community and education and meetings that we have, they'll sign up either for a coach or actually get involved in a practice that does continuous care, which is what we do. We track, weight, blood pressure, blood sugar completely remotely. We do lab work completely remotely. CAC scores anywhere in the country, we order them. And that's, the Dr. Tro app, and that's how you can get started pretty much.
Perfect. So the Dr. Tro app, that's the place to go, and really enjoyed this interview with one of America's smartest and refreshingly direct and robust doctors. And as always, huge thanks and appreciation to my many Patreon and PayPal supporters. Links are down below for anyone else who can help support the mission. And we need to get out there, get the best science, well circulated, counter kind of legacy media misinformation and disinformation, the genuine versions of that come from legacy media, which is sadly at this stage pretty much purchased by pharmaceutical, food industry and other advertiser interests, as well as more kind of malign influences even beyond that. So really appreciate the support, and anyone who continued to support travel, investigations and getting the right material out there to keep the people informed. Thank you.